So welcome back. This is the second part on operating the telescope. You've now started everything up, the camera, dome structure is following the telescope and so on. And there's one more tip I want to give you when you're operating the telescope. Normally you would also like to have a look at the weather conditions outside. So one way to do that is actually to switch the window down here to Meteo Stats. There is a small weather station outside of the dome structure that measures the outside humidity, pressure, temperature inside the dome, outside the dome, and so on. There's some really nice data here that you can have a look at when you're doing observations. So normally you wouldn't want the humidity to be too high, although in Denmark the humidity is normally usually quite high many times of the year. So you want to keep this low if possible. One other thing you can do here is you can switch this window back again, and you can actually do manual operations of the telescope, moving the telescope up, down, left, right, basically. This is the same operations as you would do inside of the dome structure, where you have the manual pad that you can also use when you're showing off your skills to the audience, or when the audience is showing off the skills to you. So anyway, back to this short tutorial video. We're turning back to meteor data here. And then the next thing you want to do is that you want to open MaxIm DL. This is the program that we use to take pictures of the sky. Opening up the telescope camera program, MaxIm DL. And you want to click on these two buttons up here. Observatory control and camera control. This might take a short while. And then the first thing you need to do is you need to connect to the telescope, the focuser, and the second focuser. And you need to do that in the correct order here. Again, starting from the top, going down. Focuser 1 controls the focuser on the main camera. Focuser 2 controls the focuser on the guide camera. Yeah, that's pretty much what you need to know about here. Another important thing to know in this panel is the focus tab. The focus tab is the tab that you can use to adjust the focus. This is what you would normally do when the pictures are out of focus. You need to go into this tab, and then you need to either manually move the focus point. For instance, let's say that you notice that the telescope is out of focus, and then you move it like to 7500, and then you can move the focuser in here. And in here it should state that it's moving. Let's see, I didn't move it probably. Here in the control panel you can check that it has moved to the correct position, so 17.5 millimeters. And this should also have moved in here. It should update here, but sometimes MaxIm DL causes some issues with the connection to the focuser. So just abort this and you should be fine. You can do that for focuser 2 as well. You can move it manually. Right now it's in position 800. You can move it out to 900, let's say. It's doing that, I suppose, right now. On focuser 2 you have the option of actually having a look at the temperature, because the focus point basically depends on the temperature inside of the dome. If it's a very low temperature, then you would need to change the focus point here. So again, there's some connection issue with the focuser, but everything should be operating fine in here. So these are the two important steps. Set up connections for the telescope focuser and check the focus status. Then next you would set up the camera control itself. In here I have already input some focus data for each of the filters. In here you can actually manually set up the focus point from some reference value. that I used a couple of years ago when I was setting up this this focuser here. So for each filter inside of the camera, there's a different focus point, and it varies depending on the wavelengths of the light. That is the reason why there's a different focus for each of these filters. So when there's no filter in, the focus offset is 0, and you can actually just set this back to, I'll do that right now, to 15,000. This was the value that I used when I was setting up the focuser 2 years ago. Obviously now, today, it has probably changed due to the difference in temperature, pressure, and so on. So you might need to change that again when you're doing these observations. So let's go into the TV control and check that it's moving. The focuser here, you can see that the focuser is moving actually. 15.5, moving back down to 15.00 millimeters. So that's 1.5 centimeters in front of the camera itself. Then there's the filters. Boom, it's back down to 15,000. And that means that when I'm connecting to the telescope, it should actually use these values as offsets when you're changing the filter later on. So you can have a look at this when you decide at some point in the future. Okay, so now we're ready to go. We've set up the camera. You don't need to change anything else here. There's no filter on the secondary camera. It's a color CCD, so no filters. So connect to the both cameras, and you should see it down here in the status window. Camera is idle. Then the next thing you need to do is to turn on the coolers. So the camera itself needs to be cooled down to a temperature of approximately -20 degrees for the primary camera. This takes a bit of time, so you need to be a little bit patient here, and it needs to stabilize around this value, -20 degrees Celsius. And normally it overshoots a little bit, so it will probably be like -22, 23 degrees Celsius, and then the cooler will turn a little bit down again, and then it sort of oscillates around these -20 degrees, but it should be approximately -20 degrees before you do the real observations. So let it cool down for a couple of minutes, let it stabilize. These are the key words here, and then you're ready to go. While you're waiting, you can have a look back in the focuser window over here. Now, in the future, it should be possible actually to optimize the focus automatically. I've set up everything, so you don't need to change anything in here. I've set up the telescope parameters, how it should move, and so on. So you can actually basically just click start when the camera is on down here, and then it will automatically take an image of a very clear star in the field that you're looking at, and it will try to optimize the focus for that filter that you have chosen for that star. You can do that. There's also a very nice tutorial online that you can use. I recommend having a look at the MaxIm DL Part 6, Automated Focusing and Filter Offsets. This video in itself deals with focusing. It's a very important issue that you need to have a look at if you want to do good observations with this telescope. Okay, so going back to the camera control here, we can see that the sensor temperature is down at -20 degrees Celsius, roughly. So now it's stabilizing around this temperature. Let's assume that it's stabilized now. You probably need a few more minutes to do that, but I'll speed up things a little bit here for the purpose of this video. So now that you have set up your focusing, you've set up your camera, you are basically ready to make your first observations. But before you do this, you need to make sure that you have chosen a star, and you can do that by going back down here and having a look at the carte de Seal program. This is the program that we use to find stars on the night sky. So when you use this program, you also need to make sure that you have connected to the telescope again. And you do that by clicking Telescope, Connect Telescope, and Connect Telescope. That's basically it. And what you will see here is that the telescope is pointing due north as it was in the TP control panel. So you can see that by having a look here. It's N here. It's pointing north, roughly some 15 degrees above the horizon. This corresponds to the values in here. You're pointing north. The actual position, you can have a look here. It's the green bar up here. So moving back into carte de Seal, you can have a look at a specific star. So let's say that we want to have a look at one of the stars in the Ursa Minor constellation. You right click on a star and you go to Telescope and you go to Slew to bit Ursa Minor. Boom. Now what is happening is that the telescope is actually moving down here. You can see this live inside of the carte de Seal program. Pretty cool that you can follow this. And when it has finished following this and slewed to the correct position, then you can begin your initial observations. And again, patience is a virtue when you're doing astronomical observations, so I'll just let time pass. So the telescope is settling around the star Beta Ursa Minor. The second brightest star in this constellation. Alpha would have been the brightest. Okay, so you need to make sure that the telescope is stabilized. It seems that it's stabilized right now. And then you're basically ready to do a single shot observation. So when you're doing the first exposure, I recommend just taking a few seconds, let's say 4 seconds, and then a single exposure. Light frame is the frame type you want to choose if you just basically want to have an image of what you're seeing. And a usual filter wheel to begin with could be the V filter wheel. So let's click start. And it's taking an exposure of this particular star. 4 seconds have passed. Boom, it takes 11 seconds to read out the data from the camera. And right now you will see an image. Of course, this is not an image of the actual star, because right now I'm just doing a tutorial on this, but you can try that when it's evening and so on. So you should be able to see a star in the middle of the image here. And then you're basically ready for the next step, which is calibrating and so on for the telescope operation. Thank you for your patience.